Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Hitting the Field podcast. It's your host, Jeremy Brener, and today we are talking the return of the NBA. Yes, that is right. The NBA has announced its plan to return to action July 31st, 8 weeks and 1 day from today, June 4th. And Okelo Pena is here with me today to talk about the NBA being the first of the major sports leagues to return to action. Okelo, you've returned to the Hitting the Field podcast today. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. It's a great day, I guess, to be back in action. So with the NBA returning and us being back on the show, it's great. I'm definitely excited.
Yes, the return of the Hitting the Field podcast after about a week and a half, 2 weeks, but we're finally making our return. But let's just get right to it. So the NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski was talking about this yesterday morning around 11ish noon, and was saying that the NBA Board of Governors is expected to approve Adam Silver's plan to return to the league. Now, it's a 22 team format that the league will resume with. It will only bring 13 of the 15 teams out of the West and 9 of the 15 teams out of the East. Basically, teams that still are in playoff contention going to our backyard, the Wide World of Sports in Orlando. And the league is going to look a lot different, Okelo, but these are unprecedented times we're facing. And do you believe that the NBA is making the right decision to return to action?
There's a lot of there's a lot of thoughts that can go on to this. Obviously, the players want to play. Obviously, they want to get paid, and there's still a bit, I guess, a sense of disappointment for other teams who are not playing right now, like the Cavaliers or the Timberwolves, who don't get a chance to finish their season. Me personally, as I'm a bit happy that basketball is back and we get to kind of get a sense of an ending, I'm still on the conscious side because to me, you're playing, yes, in Orlando, but you're playing in it with empty, no fans. It's not gonna have that same playoff atmosphere. It's gonna feel like just playing a pickup game at the park to me. I'm not as thrilled as happy as I am that I get to at least see an NBA finish, but for my Denver Nuggets not to feel the mile high fans cheer and get the roar of the crowd that they need. I don't know personally how that's going to feel just as a fan reacting. It's tough, but I understand players want to play, they want to get paid. But there just has to be a lot of things that have to happen behind the scenes. Obviously with the ongoing of coronavirus, in order to just make this potentially work if they can.
I think that Adam Silver, this is going to define his legacy as a commissioner, and I think he made the right decision. The NBA has always been ahead of the curve, you would say, in terms of leagues and how they're canceling. I mean, when we go back to almost 3 months ago, when the coronavirus hit the United States, the NBA was the first league to suspend its season. And that's when the NCAA followed suit. That's when NHL followed suit. That's when Major League Baseball followed suit. So the NBA has always been ahead of the curve on this. I think they've been very careful as to how to go about this. And they're the first to attempt to try to come back. And I think that's admirable. And I think that is going to be a huge plus when it comes to Adam Silver's legacy, especially if this turns out to be a success. And I think that it's important to understand that they are taking very cautious measures to make sure that these players are safe. I think that bringing 22 teams is the right amount. I think that I understand that the 8 teams that are not going to Orlando want to finish their season for the most part, but in order to limit the risk of transmitting the virus, you have fewer people there, and I think that that's worth. I think it's worth having less teams there to decrease that risk. So, I mean, let's talk about this. Orlando. You and I both live in Orlando, and that's in UCF's backyard. How awesome is it that, in such unprecedented times, Orlando is looked at as a city that is seen as uh, a place that can hold an event like this?
I think it's awesome, in the sense of this, when you go through a process like this, you really have to consider this, and I think it adds to a certain amount of attraction, for the city of Orlando, other than just the magic, and it's I think it's a pretty unique thing. I'm looking to see like the advertisements and like the PR, how they're going to publicize this, the mix in maybe the Disney type of atmosphere. It should be fun. I think if you're a resident of Orlando, it's kind of cool. You never know, like for example, if you're just randomly strolling in downtown, you just might randomly see LeBron James or somebody like that, or in between the resorts. So I think I think it's pretty unique in
Yeah,
that way.
I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of that. I just think it's nice that Orlando is innovative enough to be able to do something like this. That was to me the draw of it, because the players are pretty much, they're going to be, in a sense, that's kind of what the NBA has been trying to create, is this bubble. So no events are going to be really taking place. They've basically booked up the courts there at the Wide World of Sports for from July 31st until October 12th, and they have the domain there. Nobody's gonna come. They're gonna basically be quarantined. There's no. They can go to Disney outdoor restaurants. They can go to Disney, which, I mean, if you're gonna have lunch, probably not a good idea because it will rain at some point.
Yeah.
And they can golf on the golf courses near the resorts there. Which also, if you do it in the middle of the day, probably gonna get rained on. It's a long summer, but that's the idea for having it in one city. I think there were ideas that were popping up about having half of it in Orlando, or the Eastern Conference in Orlando, half of it in Vegas, or the Western Conference in Las Vegas. But I think it's smart just to limit your risk by having just one city. And they're going to play at 8 games before the traditional best of 7 rounds in each round of the playoffs, which I think is great, because the season is already going to be given an asterisk because of how it's going to finish. But I think changing the changing the game as much as they can, they already have to. I don't think changing it more is going to help your situation. I think that you need to keep it as strict to the bone as you possibly can.
No, I agree. But one thing that I definitely like uniquely with this whole situation, as you mentioned, Jeremy, like to me, like when you sound it out with everything, like with the players going to the czar, it almost gets it to a sense, like ironically, as like the Olympics is canceled. It's like a little village that most of these players and teams have. So it's like you still get like bondship with some of the players that you're already with on your team, but it's also like you mix and match up with guys from like the Wizards or the Kings or the Trailblazers. So I think it's a thing that could even bond players in that sense. Like even
Right.
though that they're fighting for the one big prize that is an NBA championship.
Especially, the thing is, especially in times like what we're facing currently in the country and in the world. Um, I think that's been a big reason why the world has felt so divided lately, is because there's nothing really to bring us together. And sport is something that does bring people together. Sports, music, and tragedies. Unfortunately, in this case, I mean, when it comes to the tragedy of police brutality in our country, I do think that people are coming together, but in a sense, they're coming together, but they're also separating itself. It's in sport, there is only people who come together, and I think that the world has sorely missed that, and I think the NBA has a duty and has to perform a service, because these people are nationwide, and not just nationwide, worldwide known athlete. LeBron James is going to be there. Anthony Davis is going to be there. Like, these people, James Harden, very like known all over the world. These people are going to be in Orlando finishing this season, and everyone's going to be watching. Maybe not in the stands, but from the comfort of their living room, they will be.
It is something that I think, as you mentioned, Jeremy, it is something that the game has sorely missed. Now, obviously, would fans love to be in the specific arenas like the Toyota Center, like the Pepsi Center? Absolutely. But I think at this time, we could use a little something to cheer for. And the NBA has always done at least a good job in the eyes to always do this. And I even look just like what they did this past year with everything with Kobe Bryant and how they did the All Star game. So I'm all for it. I think the NBA could make it right. If they have to even pump in noise for the crowd, so be it. But I think it is something that we need as a distraction and something that you're right unifies and gets us to where we feel happy and like sort of like in this together type thing.
They could. I see them doing a lot of Kobe tributes. Orlando is the city where, is home to where one of Kobe's 5 rings was clinched. He won his fourth championship in Orlando in Game 5 of 2009's finals. But I could see them doing some kind of tribute for Kobe, of course. It's been a rough year for the NBA community, for the African American community, for the American community, for everybody. And I think that this is because like, if you remember the All Star game was a perfect time. Like the All Star game, there was something else. Like you could feel it. It was not just an ordinary All Star game. It felt different because that's the one time when the NBA community gets to come together and they get to celebrate basketball. And this, in a way, is yes, it's for all the marbles and a championship and the biggest prize you could possibly get in a basketball career, but in a sense, it's more than that. It's not just it's not just a championship. It might be the most important championship of all.
I think sports, as you mentioned, Jeremy, it's bigger than the game. Sometimes, it's more than just winning a title and everything. So, for a community to really embrace something and to be a part of something that is positive and brings more than just accolades to it, just a sense of pride and happiness and joy. It is something that you need.
Yeah. So let's get into the details more about the resumption of the season. So 22 teams, every team is going to play 8 games. I looked at this and I thought it was pretty interesting because obviously going into the lockout or the lockdown, which was a very random time of the season to do that,
Mm-hmm.
there were some teams have played more games than others. You look at the Lakers sitting at the top of the West at with what is it 49-14. That's 63 games, but the Mavericks have played 67 games. So like to me, I don't know if that to me was the one thing that I didn't really understand about this return to action plan is that you're going to end up at the end of the season with teams playing not playing the same amount of games, and how can you really determine who's a better team if they've played a different number of games?
Well, I think, Jeremy, we have to think in the sense of the layoff. I mean, other than, yes, the games, but remember, the NBA hasn't played basketball in over 3 months. Players may have had, workouts during this quarantine time to stay in shape, but, I think it's a fresh start. I think we have to look at it in a way that, in a sense, the records are somewhat the same, but in the mindset, it's 0-0 win loss. So these teams have to get, of course, with each other, of course, maintaining CDC lines. And then when training camp begins for that short little run, then, having these 8 games, it's just, I think you could say it's that preseason for that adrenaline rush for the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at it as, like, yes, but think about the layoff. Think about players that, have been, vacationing and maybe, just been chilling at home. It's going to take some time for them to get into game shape. And
Right.
I think these 8 games are going to help certain players get back into that mode, into that mindset, so that they can be ready to play.
I think the biggest criticism of this 8 game thing, because I've thought about it since I learned about it about 24 hours ago, and I think that it's not really for the teams that are in the playoff race, because in the West right now, 5.5 games separate second from seventh. But
Right.
because all the games are in Orlando, you're not playing for home court advantage. It
Right.
really just comes down to matchups. And I think where you're going to see some teams might maybe manage the load a little bit more than other teams because they want to get in a specific seed so they can play a specific team in the first round. I think we could see some of that, which, whether that's the right move or the wrong move is not my answer. My answer doesn't matter in that regard. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it does affect the team. I think the team that is the worst off with something like this is the Spurs. Now, here's why. The Spurs are right now 4 games back of the 8 seed,
Mm-hmm.
and they're only a half a game behind 9, 10, and 11, who are all basically 3.5 back of 9 or of 8. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if the Spurs and the Kings play if the Spurs, Blazers, Pelicans, and Kings all have the same record, or the Spurs and one of those three teams have the same record, and they are tied for 9, well, obviously the team that's ahead is going to win
True.
because they played one more game in the pre-Corona season. So that's not, to me, that's not really fair for the Spurs. I think they're obviously, look. There's no correct way to do this because this has never been done,
Right.
and I think whatever you do, there is going to be, like, you can't appease everybody here. There's no way. There's no way you can appease all 30 teams in this scenario. Obviously, there are teams that are not coming to Orlando that would love to come to Orlando, but
Mm-hmm.
that it just doesn't make sense for them to. And then there are teams like the San Antonio Spurs that, they got a shot, and there's a big streak on the line of winning. How many? They've been to the playoffs every year since 1998.
True.
That's the line here, and it's very likely to be broken considering they're 4 back with 8 to play,
Mm-hmm.
and their streak of having winning seasons is going to come to an end considering they're 9 games below 500 with 8 to play.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one of the anomalies that I found in this in this format. But do you think that so? Are you on board with 8 games for every team? Do you think that's the right move? Do you think maybe they should have less games? Maybe they should have more games? What are your thoughts on that?
Personally, more, because I feel like you need teams to at least have that bit of sense, as you said, like for example the Spurs, of getting like that winning record, I guess, to maintain it. But they're trying to finish off as quickly as they can, because that they have to of course get faster to next season because of the draft, and because they're going to have to start the season later and all that. I personally want more games just because I feel that it gives teams a fairer opportunity to be able to compete and to be able to fully get in, because you think about, maybe it comes down to the last game of that 8 game season, and say for example it's the Kings or the Pelicans or the Spurs, and it's kind of like a ticky-tacky situation, to where that it's going to come down to just that one game where maybe the Kings started off with a great skit, with a great start, and then they had a little bit of a skid. So I think it's a tough situation. I personally want more games just because I feel like there's a better opportunity for every player.
Yeah, I think they realized they had only so much time. I think this whole 8 game setup is probably going to take probably 2.5, 3 weeks. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think they're going to put teams, and say, "Hey, we're going to play 8 games in 8 days." I think they're going to try to at least make it 2 weeks, because then at that point you're playing basically every other day. I think that
Right.
would make sense. If there's 8 games for 22 teams, I can't even imagine how many games. So that's what 11. There's 88 regular. Oh, hold on, is that right? Yeah. There's 22 teams. There's 11 matchups, 8 times. There's 88 regular season games to be played. So they can do that in probably 3 weeks.
Right.
So 3 weeks at the most. So we're in late August is when the playoffs would start. So, um, is there a team that, given their situation right now, that this setup improves their chances, or maybe gives them an advantage that they might not have gotten if this were a normal season?
I think it would be either the top two teams in the West right now for their seeding, and I think it's the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. I think, as much as I would personally like to see maybe the Kings get up there, because I think they're a team that I feel like with this long break that they had, they got some of their guys healthy, and I think they're one of the most underrated, talented teams. But I think the Grizzlies and the Pelicans, those teams were coming in hot after the break and before this thing started. And I think with Memphis's record, they had that little bit of an edge. So I think those two teams, and I could even see maybe I want to say Dallas even because like I think the Mavs had a little bit of like that slog and it could help improve their record as well. So I think in between those teams, between the six and that 8 seed slot, between the three of them, I think it helps improve their chances.
Improve their chances of what?
Improve their chances of, I think, getting a better record in a sense, and then to move up, and then as well because you have players I think that were questionable with injuries, and as well as maybe getting back into a better position. I know it's kind of tricky with Dallas's situation, where they are, because as you mentioned, like the seedings can go either way, but I think this Dallas could be a team that pulls away with it, and then Memphis could maybe just keep that little edge on top of the AC that they have.
For the Okay, so for this question, which two teams does it help?
Oh,
I'm gonna
sorry.
go. This might sound like a bit of a homer answer, but I'll give you two teams to show that I have a more well-rounded opinion, I guess.
No,
But
no.
I'm gonna go with Houston, my hometown Rockets. This is a very good scenario for the Rockets and for the Milwaukee Bucks, because
Okay.
here's why. Milwaukee and Houston play the game so fast, so quickly. They play the game like it is. They try to get up and down the court as quickly as possible. They're the top two scoring offenses in the league. And the reason why playoff basketball slows down is because you're at that point in the season where you've played 82 plus games. Then you're tacking on to that with, playoffs, injuries, where, we're getting a season here at the end where there aren't too many injuries for that are going to affect these teams. Houston's all healthy. Milwaukee's all healthy. And you're at that point. I mean, rust maybe, but that's what those 8 games are for. You're going to get to the playoffs, and you're going to have, for the most part, fresh, rejuvenated legs. And I think it's going to benefit teams that play a much quicker style. You've seen last year the Bucks; they were the best team in the league all year, but they lost to a team in Toronto that slowed the game down for them and took them out of their rhythm. And Milwaukee is going to be able to be a lot quicker now because they have the fresh legs to do it. And same for Houston. Houston, they go up the floor so fast because all 5 of them are short. Right? Well, in basketball terms, short. But their MO is, we want to go as fast to the rim as possible. And that is their MO. And I think that those two teams I think that those two teams honestly could make a lot of noise in the playoffs, more than what they're expected to be honest.
I'm hard pressed to say when you said Milwaukee and Houston, because they do have the high tempo offense, and it does catch teams off their games, Jeremy. But I would say, like, as it does improve them, you mentioned playoff basketball, things start to slow down. And yes, you do have a fresh set of legs, but there's always something in between. I look at teams that have still sturdy defenses as the keys to be able to go down there. I look at, for example, my hometown with the Miami Heat, for example. I think as their offense and defense are so even that you can move up the court with Jimmy Butler and you have Bam Adebayo, for example, to slow down on defense and play quick up. So for teams that have an even sides of the ball, this could be an even bigger advantage for them. So I think for example, the Miami Heat could be something. I would even say watch out for the Indiana Pacers for it. Even though they didn't necessarily make a lot of buzz as
They're
much this
healthy
year,
now.
yeah, Victor Oladipo. We know what he's capable of come playoff time.
Mm-hmm.
So think about him. You get Miles Turner, Malcolm Brogdon. I think Indiana also has another good shot as a sleeper team to maybe make that noise.
Is there a team that you feel is going to hurt from having the format of the season all shaken up? What
Man,
team do you think this hurts the most?
I would say I'm going to be a little odd on this one, but I want to say for some reason the Celtics. Because for some reason, I don't know why, but it's just not the type of situation that I feel like they could come in and easily because remember they don't have a big man, so their defense isn't as capable, and it's not one of the highest defenses in the league. And their offense can go quick, but I just don't see them for some reason playing around as despite they have Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown and Kemba Walker. But I think for some reason it's gonna slow them down. I just have a hunch for Boston. I don't know why.
I think the obvious answer most people would say here is Memphis, because Memphis was in line to get that 8 seed, and this whole thing has kind of thrown them off, especially with the whole play-in rules. And we'll get to the play-in rules a little bit later, but I think Memphis is an obvious answer. But I actually don't think Memphis is as screwed here as many people believe. I think they're actually been given a pretty fair chance to actually get that 8 seed. But if I had to name one of these teams, I'd probably go with Utah. And the only reason is Bojan Bogdanovic is injured. I think there is tension between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. It's just I, even if there isn't, maybe they got over it. I think there is a difference, and the team that's the one major injury here that one of these contending teams has is that is going to hurt with not having Bogdanovic in that lineup. They lose that 3-point scoring threat that they needed to get in the offseason and they got. Bogdanovic is what put the Jazz in number 4 spot. They were flirting with the number 2 spot at times during the season. So that is the Jazz team that comes to Orlando is not going to be the same Jazz team that we've seen all year. And I think that the format I don't necessarily think the format hurts them. I just think the injury bug hurt them more than anything. And honestly, I don't. I think this format, though, to be fair, it's fair for everyone. I think that everyone has the equal chance with 8 games in the regular season. There's no home court to play for, so the seeding doesn't really matter as much as it did before. I think it's a pretty fair shake, and I think that what we're going to see is you might not necessarily see the best team win. I think that it's important to note that seasons are as long as they are because you want to find the best team to win. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what's going to happen is the teams are going to. It's almost like a pure reset. It
Mm-hmm.
really is, and they're just going to get a chance. It's whoever's the best team. There's going to be some scenarios in which some teams might not have gotten to the finals that might get to the finals this time because um, because of the change of pace of play or whatever we see in this post Corona season. But honestly, I don't. We could also just get Lakers Bucks like everyone's been saying since October. But regardless, I think the road to get there is going to be very interesting. And I think it's a fair shake for everyone. I think that's why it was a 29-1 vote among the board of governors. Portland was the only team to dissent, but Portland wanted a 20-team format rather than a 22-team format. They didn't want San Antonio and Phoenix coming clearly, but they're going to have to deal with it, I guess. But let's talk about this. So, speaking of Portland, this is kind of where this play-in comes in. This is something that is very different in the NBA. We haven't seen something like this before, but the play-in format. Now, there was talks about Damian Lillard the season or before the format was laid out. He was saying he's not coming to Orlando if Portland doesn't have a fair shake to win a playoff spot or to play for something. Well, Portland, you got your wish. Damian Lillard, you got your wish. There is something you can play for now. So, how this works. In the Eastern Conference, it's 8 and 9. And in the Western Conference, there's a few more teams in the party. But basically, whichever team finishes in ninth place, if they finish less than 4 games behind whoever's in eighth place, then they will have a 2-game play-in series. How it works is similar to college baseball, if you're familiar with that. The lower seeded, the ninth seeded team has to win both games in the 2-game series, and the eighth seed has to win just one. I think that this is a very unique way to do it. I don't know if it's necessary, but Okelo, I want to hear your thoughts.
I think it's unique. I think it's pretty much a fair shake to give those teams within that seeding a fair opportunity to be able to move up with the postseason. You're going to have the games that that in between, like those 2-3 for the like the World Series thing that you mentioned, for example. I believe that it's fair, to give, for example, to have a whole case to fight for one seeding thing, it's not going to make much sense. So it's a quick process. It gives exciting basketball. I think personally, it's a fair process for those teams.
Now, if you're Memphis or you're Orlando, how do you feel about this, honestly? Like in any other season, if you are the number 8 seed, you are the 8 seed. There's nothing to dispute that. But in this season, if you're the 8 seed and your lead is not very high on the 9 seed, it could be 3 games difference. That could mean that you lose your spot.
Right. Right. It's interesting. It kind of does feel like it's like the preseason for some reason when I get like this type of feeling for it. It's like you're playing for of course the position and for the betterness of it, but it's like as much as your seeding and how many games you win in between, it's like it goes all out the window. All the traditions and all the usual things that we go out with, it makes it interesting. So no, nothing is guaranteed. It makes these players hungry and it makes them want to win faster.
Yeah, here's my thing. I think that it's fair for Memphis and Orlando. I understand if I would feel kind of frustrated, but at least if you're the 8 seed, you have a chance to prove why you should be in the playoffs. If you lose
Mm-hmm.
2 games to the 9 seed, like that's the thing. I think to me it should be if you're 2 games back or not, because if
Mm-hmm.
you're, I don't think it should be 4 games. I think it's a lot, but I think if it's 2 games, that's enough. And if you're 2 games back, that means that you can win 2 games and you're in. To me, that's what, if I had to change it a little bit, that's what I would do. But I think that honestly, the league was looking uh, to kind of appease these teams that weren't in the playoffs that wanted a chance to get in. Look, I mean, the Magic and the Wizards, the difference is 5.5 games. The Blazers and Grizzlies, along with the Pelicans, Grizzlies, Kings, Grizzlies, Spurs, Grizzlies, that's 4 games. So right in the middle there is 4.5. So, or yeah, 4 games, 4.5 games. And I think that's what it was. I think that's why they came on that number. If if it returned, that's how I would have it with 2 games in future seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I mean, you're just winning a ticket to get your butt handed to you by the Lakers or the Bucks. Like that's all you're playing for. Like it's not like baseball where you're playing for the wild card, where the wild card has a legit, success rate over team like the Washington Nationals were a wild card team last year that had to win the wild card game to win. But I mean, and they won. But in basketball, it's different because in basketball, the difference between look, I mean, you're talking about Orlando, who is 23 games behind the Bucks. You're talking about the Grizzlies, who are 18 games behind the Lakers. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a big difference there. There's not a huge difference between the Washington Nationals and the Dodgers because the Dodgers like that was a there wasn't that big of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, it might have been like I think it was over 10 games, but 10 games in baseball is very different to 10 games in basketball. 10 games in basketball is over 10% of the season. Ten games
Right.
in baseball is about 7% of the season.
Right.
So I think that that's the thing here is you're asked like you win a ticket to get beat in the first round by the best team in your conference. Good for you. Like I don't think that I understand why they did it, and I think it's good that they did it. I don't know if it's going to come back in future seasons. I'd have to see it play out first. I think that the league would like it because you can technically say, oh, the 9 seed was a playoff team. They can get revenue for being in the playoffs or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what they do. I don't know, but to me, like I don't I really hope that the league tries to not pull as many like first time shenanigans in this post Rona season because it already is the first time for a lot of these things and it's going to make this season a lot different than the others. So don't make this so much different that it's not the same thing anymore.
Right. I think there's a sense of tradition that they have to keep a little bit, Jeremy. But and look, and when you made all the comments on the AC, and like I understand, like the Lakers and Bucks, they're a great team, but don't also forget, Jeremy. Like yes, like ACs, they don't seem like to have a chance. The game's difference, but the thing about playoff basketball that you and I both know very well is like to always expect the unexpected. So I'm just saying, like yes, in a sense, these may not feel like the same teams, but with this first time thing and to give that opportunity, like you never know if, for example, you're going to get a 94 version of the Nuggets beating a 1 seed in the Sonics. I'm saying it's not the chance, but it's always elusive because remember, we've been out of basketball for 3 months. There could be teams that get healthy at the right time that just for some reason make these miraculous things happen. Talent wise, it's hard to judge, for example, the Kings or the Pelicans between a team like the Lakers. But I just feel like, at the end of the day, to me, it's 0-0. These teams have new life, and it's just a new opportunity for them to really hopefully give at least their fan bases something I think to look forward to and be at least excited about that their team is at least in the dance to try to bring something to their city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I see why they did it. I think that honestly, I think part of the reason why they did this is because they wanted to bring stars like Damian Lillard, like uh, like Zion to Orlando. Uh, I think that was the major reason behind that. To be honest, is you get a chance to market more of your star players in the league. So that to me is I think the biggest reason why they did it. I honestly hope that they keep the game as pure as possible. That's all that I hope for. I know there are teams that are saying they're looking for more advantages, the top seeds at least, and I didn't, I don't know about the whole, list of all the requests that they're making, but to me, I think you just gotta play the game how it is because the season's going to have an asterisk on it regardless of who wins. Even if it's the Bucks or the Lakers, the teams that are supposed to win, there's still going to be an asterisk on it. You're going to say, "Oh, well, that wasn't supposed to be that." But honestly, at the end of the day, like it's still the same game,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as you keep it the same game, if you decide to go and make all these changes, like oh, you can have more fouls in one quarter, or oh, you can do this, oh, you can do that. Like at this point, I feel like you're just grasping at straws, and you need to try to keep the game as close to the original product so that your champion can be justified.
You have an established brand. You don't need any gimmicks or anything to try to spice it up. Playoff basketball is already exciting as it is, Jeremy. You don't need to
Mm-hmm.
get creative. You don't need to get too like, oh, I don't know. At the end of the day, you got to play the way that the fans enjoy it and that they've come to know and love it. Now with this, of course, format and this season, you're right. It does add an asterisk to the season because we'll never really truly know the fight of the finish of, for example, April basketball, and to where the way that things would be truly be, we would have a true 8 seed. But we, at the end of the day, still stick to your guns, do what's right, and I think at the end of the day, you're still going to have great players come in, and we get to even see teams like who haven't made the playoffs for a while, or haven't, or get these guys some exposure to where it could build momentum on for something. So I think even as well, it's something that will still be enjoyable to watch in addition to for the teams vying for that championship.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's about it. We kind of covered everything there. A little bit of everything. Got a lot of teams in there. But that's all for now. Thank you so much, Okelo, for coming on to the podcast today. You're making your return to the podcast as the NBA makes its return to play. Thank you.
No problem. Appreciate always talking b-ball with you, Jeremy.
And we will continue our coverage of the NBA's return along with MLS's return, the return of all sports leagues across the world here on the Hitting the Field podcast over the next couple weeks. So be sure to give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Hitting the Field. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And our YouTube channel. We also post all of our podcasts to our YouTube channel. You can also check out previous episodes of Hitting the Field over there. We recently created a Black History Month collection playlist on YouTube. So if you are looking to be inspired, click on that playlist and listen to, or watch and listen to our past 3 Black History Month episodes. So that's all that we've got today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and catch you on the flip side.